Hello and welcome to the President's Podcast, right here on the record with the Ohio Senate. The views the news excludes. I'm John Fortney, the Director of Communication with the Senate Republican Caucus, the Majority Caucus in the Ohio Senate. Great to have on the Senate Finance Chair, Republican from Kirtland, Ohio, State Senator Jerry Cirino from the 18th District. Thanks for having us up to Lake County.
Well, welcome to my home.
Beautiful place. This has been a busy time for you, not only as Finance Chair with the capital budget that's been happening, but last week, the week before last, there was the Future of Nuclear Energy Forum in Perry, Ohio, where the Perry Nuclear Power Plant is. What was the importance? It was a really great turnout from the industry, from regulators, about the future of not only data center projects, but also the future of accountable, reliable, affordable power in Ohio.
It was a great meeting, and really, John, the meeting actually happened because I wrote an op-ed for the Dispatch in which I was talking about and promoting the SMRs, the smaller modular nuclear reactors. And AFP noticed it and called me and said, hey, we'd like to talk about this some more. And in the course of our conversation, we thought about, hey, let's have a roundtable discussion to talk about this very important subject. And we developed that over a couple of months. And then we also decided that having it in Perry, a stone's throw from the Perry nuclear facility, would be a great venue for this discussion. So we went about the process of planning that roundtable. We had great participants. We had Awesome Hawk from PJM Interconnect. We had Chair French from the PUCO. We had other stakeholders. We had someone from Vistra there. A lot of good stakeholders and other legislators as well. And we had a 4-hour discussion on so many topics related to the future of nuclear energy in the state of Ohio. It was awesome.
This is all about baseload power projects because House Bill 15, which started out as Senate Bill 2, and that was, by the way, voted unanimously in the Senate, approved unanimously on a 33-0 vote. But House Bill 15 really took an all-of-the-above approach on baseload power, especially. And nuclear energy is baseload power, is it not?
It is baseload. It is baseload would be defined as something that is reliable and consistent and constant. The sun and the wind are not any of those, but they're important. And so when I talk about nuclear, I like to think of it as, it's a major part of the various components that will deliver the energy that we need, all right, to operate in Ohio. And because it's base load, because it's reliable, somewhat storable, we can plan on what generation is going to happen. It doesn't exclude or in any way denigrate alternative energy. I'm fine with alternative energy. Wind and solar is great, but we need to rely on natural gas supplies and nuclear really to get our base load power generation to a point where we can not only meet the needs of our communities, but also participate on the grid in providing power to other communities around the PJM interconnect.
Yeah, PJM interconnect basically is the overall, I would almost say wholesaler, or it makes sure it analyzes the amount of energy out there amongst those states.
It manages
on the grid.
It manages the grid for 12 states in the District of Columbia.
Yeah, we had Awesome Hawk on a great one-on-one interview, as well as we have 2 videos that have received a lot of attention with Senator Cirino, also Senator Brian Chavez, a Republican from Marietta, who's the energy chair.
Right.
And we'll be talking about the other person that we interviewed from Oklo, which is part of that small modular reactor project down in Pike County, Ohio. But make sure you find those on our Facebook page at Ohio Senate GOP, also on our YouTube page, Ohio Senate GOP. What does the Perry plant mean, even additionally, outside of generation for Ohio, the grid, but for this area?
Well, if the General Assembly and the administration back in 2018, had not intervened, and a lot of us worked very hard to protect nuclear power in Ohio, if we had not intervened with the legislation that was passed, both Perry Nuclear Plant and Davis-Besse, just a little bit east of Toledo, would both have been closed now for a couple of years. And back then, people did not anticipate the power demands that we were going to have in the future the way we now know that we should have. And so I just think very often, where would we be if those two plants were not currently delivering baseload power? We would be buying baseload power from other states that are generating. And guess what that would do to the cost for our ratepayers?
Sure. That's the whole thing, and that's what Awesome Hawk from PJM was saying. And Hawk used to be the chair of the Public Utilities Commission in Ohio. And I asked him, how well positioned is Ohio as far as not only providing energy to the grid, but right here at home with consumers? And he said very well positioned because you have natural gas.
We still have coal, by the way.
Yeah.
And we can still generate power with coal. We have natural gas, an abundance of natural gas. We have two fully operational nuclear facilities that have just had their lifetime extended significantly out to the future. So we don't have and we have the ability to bring in SMRs, which I strongly believe is going to be something that we have to do. That we don't have a generation problem right now. What we have is a strategy problem. And we need to pull together what is the strategy for the state of Ohio for generation. And that was one of the subjects that we discussed at the roundtable last week in Perry. And we had some great discussions. Ideas that were proposed were included, for the new administration coming in January, that there needs to be a cabinet level position on energy, okay, who would have the responsibility to work with the legislature to drive a very clear and cogent energy generation strategy for the state of Ohio.
Because it is going to be the future based on basically the data world, data technology, data centers. Everything is technology, web-based, and storage-driven now.
Right. Absolutely. And so we either are going to, stay with it and grow with the changing demands, or we're going to be sitting back dependent on somebody else. And I'd rather not be in that position.
Yeah, dependent on foreign countries that might be seen as our enemies. Former Congressman Bill Johnson, the new president of Youngstown State University, State Senator Terry Johnson on this show just a couple weeks ago was talking about the importance of being able to manage our data and technology right here at home instead of having a data center in China or outside of somewhere we can't control. And I guess that gets to the importance of the small modular reactors that Adrian Schweer from Oklo was talking about, which is part of that $33 billion investment in Pike County at the the former site of the Portsmouth gaseous diffusion plant. And these small modular reactors don't come with gigantic cooling towers. It's a different, I'll say different form or a different technology, still nuclear, but on a smaller scale and very stable.
Well, we are not going to see new nuclear plants built that resemble anything close to the Perry plant or Davis-Besse. That vintage is long in the past. What we're going to see is more akin to what we have seen for decades that the U.S. Navy has been using on submarines, nuclear submarines, and aircraft carriers that generate their own power. Sometimes, I was reading the other day that one of the aircraft carriers that's now deployed in the Middle East generates is enough power every day to satisfy the needs of most small cities in the United States. And so we have the technology. It's not only existing technology, it is technology that is very mobile, being on the seas on our ships. And so what we're talking about, and SMRs sort of resemble that, in that they are smaller, they're obviously modular, they can be sited a lot easier than a complete new nuclear plant can. And, I think it's the legislature's job to make sure that we are on board with this stuff and making sure that we are going to be in a good position in the future and not wake up 20 years from now and say, oh, look what we should have done and look where we are now.
And that was one of the beautiful things about House Bill 15 and the new energy plan for Ohio that the General Assembly passed. It allowed behind the meter generation, which is basically what this Meta data center project brings to southern Ohio with the SMRs and multiple SMRs that not only provide power to the data center, but also provide power out to the grid. So it's supply and demand. The more supply you have, well, that helps out with the cost and the affordability.
Well, it's going to be a little bit of a timing issue because, and we had someone from Meta at our roundtable speaking on a number of subjects. So I think what we'll see in House Bill 115, or excuse me, 15, really began to deal with some of these issues. We have more legislation that'll be necessary, but to get some of these to supply power to these data centers, we are going to have behind the meter to get started with, because you can't deal with the distribution, quite so quickly, and it has a lot of cost. So ultimately, even though the power for many data centers will be generated locally by their own generation, eventually we want that power generated to be on the grid when the economics work better, because that means more power on the grid, more gigawatts available, and the more you have of something, the less costly it tends to be.
Are you surprised that I never thought it would happen? I mean, you always have some, not in my backyard type of issue, regardless of where you live. But is it just because it's an election year that data centers have become such a political football? Of all things, I mean, you're not putting something that is poisoning the atmosphere and the environment, but yet that is the narrative that is out there now from some of these well-funded groups that are billed as just, we're just good people, local people. But really, there's an intentional effort with much of the funding tied to the very same organizations that we saw funding the big gerrymandering ballot takeover back in 2024. The 1630 Fund, the Tides Foundation. Are you surprised that this has been blown into such a huge political issue?
No, I'm not. I guess I'm not surprised, because a lot of these national organizations are about raising money, okay? And they see an issue out there that they can grab onto and use it as a mechanism to get people to send them money. That's what it's all about. I am continued to be amazed in talking to people locally who don't understand what data centers are, and that we've had them for a very long time in Ohio. And one lady I was talking to, she was complaining about data centers, and I said, "Do you know what they do there?" She said, "Well, not really. Let me Google them and find out what they do." And I said, "You don't have to. You've just made my point, right?" So do we want to have data centers and control of information flow in the United States, in Ohio, or do we want to have it someplace else in another country? To me, that's the same thing as what mistake we made 25, 30 years ago in letting manufacturing move out of the United States, which increased our dependency on countries like China and others that are not very friendly to us. And now we're trying to reverse that and bring manufacturing back. Let's not make the same mistake.
Well, we learned the same thing during COVID, when a lot of the medical protective equipment that you needed was made in China, the pharmaceuticals made in China.
Right.
You want to have it here because it can become a matter of national security. And a lot of people, including Senator Johnson and former Congressman Johnson as well at YSU, say it's really a matter of national security. And it's interesting who might be behind this. When I was talking about it not being a local grassroots issue, there's a great story in the Daily Wire, and you can find it online. And it talks about a report from the American Energy Institute found the anti-AI data center movement, which has been billed as an organic movement, received more than $39 million in funding from left-wing foreign billionaire donors. Among the major donors listed in the report, Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Wyss, known for the 1630 Fund, the same fund that had $6 million invested into the political outcomes of repeal campaign that I talked a lot about. That's what I called them back in 2024. It's amazing. And then those dollars help fund things like the Sierra Club, for example, maybe in Ohio. And there was an editorial in the Columbus Dispatch by the Save Ohio Parks group. And part of it, I thought that this was entertaining. This editorial said the gas fuel cell, about a project that they were going after, will emit 1.45 million pounds of carbon dioxide every day, directly next to hundreds of homes and elementary school, a park, and the country's largest animal shelter. Well, you know what else emits carbon dioxide every day? You do, right? I mean, they want to build this as these communities are going to be glowing with radiation and we're poisoning the atmosphere. Right. And really nothing could be further from the truth. Even I think a legitimate concern that was raised by some people about what about our water? Well, many of these systems are closed loop systems anyway.
Right. Yeah, they're recirculating.
They recirculate their own water.
Yeah.
So what's your overall message to communities then about if you're going to have a data center discussion, how do you think that should be approached?
Well, I think we have to focus on what is the correct factual information here, not go by the talking points that have been proposed or propagated by some of these large groups and wealthy individuals who, by the way, fly around in private jets all the time, creating emissions that they don't seem to worry very much about. Look, communities, it's okay and it's fine for communities to be concerned about what goes on in developments in their communities, right? But I think we all have a responsibility to make sure that we are dealing with facts and that we take the time to study the issue and understand. By the way, some of the people who are complaining about property taxes in Ohio are also complaining about, not wanting, they don't want to have data centers, which pay taxes. It will help ease the tax burden on homeowners. I don't understand how they bring those two different viewpoints together.
Well, I think that's a great point as well, because it's all about economic development, especially if you can have new development on a brownfield site, especially some of the old decommissioned power plants that are no longer there in southern and southeast Ohio. So there's nothing supporting the grid. There's no energy generation, and this property is just sitting there. Well, why not make an economic development investment for a data center? And those are being met with the same kind of pushback. You were talking about the property tax issue. It was interesting there last week when the group Axe Ohio Tax, or Axe Property Taxes in Ohio, came out saying they were several 100,000 signatures short of the 415,000 needed to make the ballot this year. But they said they had, I think, 305,000 is the number I wrote down.
Right.
You really need double to 2.5 times that to make sure your signatures are validated. I guess, what was your overall reaction to this? Because the one thing that you and I have talked about in the past is that might sound good to a lot of Ohioans out there who are property owners and fed up with the escalating cost of property taxes, but it came without any alternative whatsoever.
Right. I watched the press conference. Ironically, it was around the corner from where I live, in an individual's home who, for some reason, has a replica of the Oval Office in his home. I've never been there.
That was an interesting picture in Cleveland.com.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, to me, some people have said it looks surreal. I thought it looked like something from Saturday Night Live, actually. You had these people in this Oval Office replica wearing baseball caps and sometimes sunglasses.
They get to play president.
And they were, I think it was for one of the organizers, the guy who sat at the desk, Brian Massey, I think he suffers from visions of grandeur or something, trying to be Trump-like,
right.
Signing an executive order. So that aside, their whole premise is wrong. They're looking at property taxes as a tax on unrealized gains. And that's one way to look at it, certainly. But if you drill down to it and look at your tax bill that you get twice a year and see all of the various levies that are, starting with the schools, of course, is the biggest, but all the other levies that are levying against your property value, schools, certainly libraries, seniors, senior programs, sometimes police and fire. It varies by community. But what property taxes are a fee for services rendered in the community. Okay? That, by the way, everybody, at least not everybody, a majority of the voters have voted for. I voted for Lakeland Community College levy, which is I'm paying for that in my tax bill, right? Because I want Lakeland to be there. I want it to be successful. Some of my family have used it and so on. It's a part of our higher education system. So it's not a tax on unrealized gains. It is a tax for the services that you are getting. And again, voted by the people. So what these organizers are attempting to do, believe it or not, is undo what the voters have already decided.
And taking away services. It's a fee for services. You talk about unrealized gains, but they like to say you're renting your property in perpetuity from the government.
Right.
But the real thing that you're doing is it's a fee for services, and it's locally controlled by the voters.
Very locally controlled. And my biggest criticism of this group, who I think are acting quite irresponsibly, because they don't understand or refuse to understand the consequences of eliminating property taxes, is when Brian Massey was asked at the press conference by a reporter, I believe it was by, I forget which reporter it was, but was asked, well, how are you going to replace the $24 billion a year that our communities around the state collect in property taxes? And his answer was, we don't have any ideas. We don't know about that. They'll have to figure that out in Columbus, basically, is what he's saying.
That's the last place that you want to figure out a one-size-fits-all solution for all of the metro. How many? There's 2,200 municipalities around the state of Ohio, 611 school districts.
Right. I mean, on the one hand, John, they tell us we want the state to stay out of our local businesses or local activities, home rule, et cetera, which I believe in home rule, with some exceptions. And yet on this one, because it's a big problem that they would like to create, that they're willing to turn it over to the state to solve the problem. I say it's a contradiction.
Well, and the state is not going to be raising anybody's income taxes when the General Assembly worked so hard over the last decade to get down to a flat tax.
Right.
And then the next budget most likely will have no state income tax in the state of Ohio. And it would be extremely damaging for border communities. And you're not that far away from the border of Pennsylvania.
Right.
Here, where if you have a sales tax that is, say, 20%, people are going to go across the border where the sales tax is a lot cheaper.
Well, and sales tax is a regressive tax. That means it hurts people at the lower end of the economic spectrum more than any others in other categories. And so I think what would end up having to happen, and again, this is hypothetical, but if property taxes were in fact eliminated, we would have one of the biggest tax shell games in the history of the world, because at the end of it all, with the higher income tax and higher triple sales tax, as Governor DeWine has suggested, when you look at it at the end of it, seniors, for example, are going to find out that they're actually being taxed more than they are for property taxes today. And so it's one of those be careful what you ask for, right, kind of situations. And so I think this group that is proposing and pushing for this, for the elimination of property taxes, is acting maybe in some cases in good faith, but they haven't studied the numbers. I know a little bit about the budget in the state of Ohio, as do many others.
You're the finance chair,
involved,
yeah.
And it just can't be done. It can't be done. And we have made some great moves. Last year, at the end of the year, we passed 5 bills in property tax reform. That they're going to people are going to start to see some tax relief
on the second half.
Over the next 3 years, we expect to see over $3 billion of tax relief, property tax relief for our citizens. It's just not happening immediately. That's not how it works.
Right, because there's a lag. So you'll
Correct.
start to see some of that impact here in the second half of this year.
And we've given more authority to the local communities. The budget commissions, which most people didn't even know we had.
No, I didn't.
Can actually go in and locally challenge a school system or challenge the library, whoever has levies, that they're charging taxpayers for, they can go in and actually challenge those levies.
Reduce the millage based on what that original
they-
millage was supposed to raise, right? If it's
Right.
gravy over and above what the millage was supposed to raise, taxpayers can get a credit.
Right, or if a school system is retaining too much money, too much cash in their balances, they can challenge that. So the control needs to be local, because the local people understand and know what the community's needs are. We don't want the state deciding, what a specific county is doing regarding property taxes.
Well, there, in addition to that, so I think there were 4 or 5. So you had the residential owner occupied credit. That's being phased up to 15.3%.
Right.
That's huge. Then you end the ability of school systems to run emergency and replacement levies, which were a big problem, because it basically allowed extra revenue that climbed with the valuation without a vote of the people over sometimes decades.
School systems benefited from inflation.
Right,
Actually.
they benefited from inflation.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, and so we we took the responsible approach. This at this press conference, they said that they accused the legislature of being irresponsible and deaf to the complaints and so on. I think that's very unfair. We have been very aware of the issues. We're all property taxpayers, by the way. Okay,
Sure.
So we have skin in the game, and we took a intellectual approach to solving the problem, which is the right way to do it. That's what we get paid for and what we get elected to do.
Yeah, and the last thing regarding the reforms was capping the inside and outside millage for levies, school districts, to the rate of inflation. That's a huge thing.
Right. And we'll see that in the future.
In the future, right.
So the spike that we saw post-COVID, which was, again, the root cause of all of this was inflation, which the Biden administration, it was their responsibility. They spent too much. They printed money. They wasted billions of dollars post-COVID. And that caused inflation, and that caused a series of other things, like people not willing to move because mortgage rates were so high. That meant there was less real estate available for people to buy, and that raises prices. So all of those things were created by wonderful Joe Biden, whose economic policies that he called anti-inflationary actually caused and perpetuated inflation.
Sure. Last question regarding property taxes. The work isn't over for the General Assembly on property taxes.
No.
There's more work to be done. You expect the GA to continue to enact and have discussions about further reforms.
I think there's probably a dozen or so bills floating around the House and the Senate right now. Don't know which ones will be see the light of day. Certainly some of them will. And so, we're not finished at all with property taxes. I think we may find that some of the stuff that we did last year needs to get tweaked a little bit. As people find loopholes and workarounds, we sometimes have to go in and close those loopholes. But I think there's more that we need to do. We are not deaf to the people. We are listening to our constituents on this issue. It's just a very complex problem. You can't solve it by simply, with a stroke of a pen, decide, well, we don't want property taxes at all. That's why I say these organizers are being very irresponsible, and the hundreds and hundreds of groups that have now signed on to work with us to make sure that this thing does not pass if it gets on the ballot is testimony to the fact that as more we educate people on what the consequences could be, the better off we are.
Before I let you go, the 1-year anniversary of the Senate Bill 1, the Advance Ohio Higher Education Act, which was your bill. It was really a 4-year fight. You took a lot of personal attacks over it, but it really is making a difference. When is the 1-year anniversary of that?
It's the end of June, and I'm planning on a press conference on June 24th, which is it's the anniversary is on a Friday, but we're going to do this on a Wednesday. And we're going to sit back and take a look at what's been going on. I had a great conversation with the chancellor this week. And he summarized for me his job, which is to make sure that the universities and community colleges are complying with SB 1. And I'm seeing and hearing some just fantastic, good stuff about how the universities are complying with the bill. And we've already seen one of the components that we asked for required in the bill, in the law, I should say, was that if you have to drop majors if you don't have 5 graduates over the last 3 years on average. And the chancellor shared with me that there are over 540 programs that have been dropped since the bill became law.
And those that are against it, like the what is it, the American Association of University Professors, right, that really went after you. That provides an economy of scale. That helps your overall tuition. That helps lower costs for the university, does it
right.
not?
Well,
some consolidation is not a dirty word.
The consolidations or the eliminations of programs was across the board, but it was things like majors in gender studies, or there were some things that made no sense at all. Students couldn't go out and get jobs when they graduated,
sure,
but they still had to pay off their debt.
What a novel idea!
Yeah,
have a career path when you graduate.
Yes, the universities got woke instead of focusing on the needs of the students, which is not just to educate them, but to prepare them to be able to get a job. And now with the changes in workforce demands, in in-demand jobs, we're trying to bring together more closely the post-secondary educational system and the needs of our employers, bring them closer together. I think we're making some very good progress.
And there's still college students in Ohio. Oh, what a shock. Bill Johnson, when we had him on the program, the Youngstown State University president, I asked him how enrollment was at YSU. He said it's grown consistently. Grown.
Yeah. The predictions, and one of the things I'm going to do in my press conference is go back and actually name the person who made the claim that it was going to cause dire consequences, right, if it got adopted. And we're going to take a look at what has really happened and how wrong they were. And they accused us of, a chilling effect on free speech.
Oh, it's racist as well.
Right, students are going to leave in droves. Professors are going to leave. Ohio State's going to lose all of its research grant money and so on. None of that stuff has happened, right? And we knew it would not happen. What is happening is that we are improving our post-secondary educational offerings. Our institutions are getting better. The presidents and the boards of trustees are using this to do things they've wanted to do for years. And Ohio is going to be so much better educationally as time goes on.
Senate Finance Chair Jerry Cirino, Republican from Kirtland, Ohio. Senator, thanks so much for your time and insight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.